The Allied commanders thought he'd lost his mind. The Germans were laughing at what seemed like empty boasting. But George Patton wasn't joking when he made a promise that would change everything. Hitler had just punched a massive hole through American lines in the Ardennes forest. The German army, 250,000 troops, 1,000 tanks, was charging toward the Belgian port of Antwerp. If they succeeded, they'd split the Allied forces in half and potentially force a peace deal. The attack came as a complete shock. Nobody saw it coming. But Hitler didn't know about Patton. And he definitely didn't expect that one American general would not only stop their advance, but turn their ambitious offensive into their worst disaster of the war. This is how Patton's Third Army transformed Hitler's final gamble into America's greatest battlefield victory. The man nobody expected. George Patton was already a legend. At 59, he commanded over 250,000 men and hundreds of tanks. He was the most aggressive tank commander the Allies had, and the Germans feared him more than any other general. But his reputation was complicated. Just years earlier, he'd nearly destroyed his career by slapping 2 soldiers suffering from combat stress. He'd been kept out of the initial D-Day invasion because of it, yet his tactical brilliance made him irreplaceable. The Germans respected him so much that the Allies used him as bait in a fake invasion plan. By winter, Patton's Third Army had torn across France, 600 miles in 4 months, but then supplies ran short and German resistance stiffened. Some wondered if he was only good at chasing a retreating enemy. The Battle of the Bulge would prove them all wrong. The shock. Everything changed when German forces smashed into thinly defended American positions. 29 divisions hit at dawn. The plan was audacious: drive through Belgium and Luxembourg, seize Antwerp, split the British and American armies. What made it stunning wasn't just the scale, it was the complete surprise. Allied intelligence had missed the entire buildup. The Germans had moved all those men in tanks using only night movements and radio silence. Within hours, German armor was racing west, overwhelming American units and creating chaos. General Eisenhower called an emergency meeting. The situation was dire. German forces had already pushed deep into Belgium. Entire American units were scattered or destroyed. If the Germans kept moving at this speed, they might actually reach Antwerp. That's when Patton made his move. The promise. When Eisenhower asked how long it would take to turn the Third Army north to counterattack, Patton's answer shocked the room. While other generals were still trying to understand the scope of the attack, Patton was already steps ahead. Here's the thing nobody else knew. Patton had seen this coming. His intelligence staff had noticed unusual German activity and drafted 3 separate plans for exactly this scenario. This was pure Patton. He didn't react to events, he anticipated them. His proposal defied everything in the military textbooks. He would pull 6 full divisions out of active combat, turn them 90 degrees, and march them over 100 miles through the worst winter weather in decades, and they'd arrive ready to fight. Military experts would call it impossible. Moving an army while it's engaged with the enemy is one of the hardest things you can do. Doing it in winter over frozen roads while keeping it secret? Insane. But Patton understood something the textbooks couldn't teach. Bold action can turn desperate situations into decisive victories. His philosophy was simple. Attack. Always attack. He believed the enemy was always weaker than they looked, and that rapid, aggressive action could overcome almost any disadvantage. This wasn't reckless. It was calculated aggression based on knowing his enemy's weaknesses. The flaw. Patton spotted the critical weakness immediately. Hitler's plan required perfect timing and execution. The Germans had limited fuel, enough for only 6 days, and were counting on capturing Allied fuel depots. They needed to move fast before Allied air power could intervene and before American reinforcements arrived. Any delay meant failure. Patton's solution was elegant. Instead of trying to stop the Germans where they were strongest, he'd hit them where they were most vulnerable, at the base of the Bulge. His 3-division assault would not only rescue the surrounded troops at Bastogne, but threatened to trap the entire German spearhead. He left the meeting and called his headquarters with just 2 words: play ball. That code phrase set everything in motion. Within hours, over 133,000 Third Army vehicles began one of the most complex military movements in history. 3 full divisions started marching north, followed by supply convoys carrying 62,000 tons of equipment. The Crucible. The conditions were brutal beyond belief. This was the coldest winter anyone could remember. Temperatures hovered around 7 degrees below freezing. Snow made visibility nearly impossible. American troops didn't have proper winter gear. Many just had cotton jackets and wool overcoats. Weapons froze and needed constant maintenance. Truck engines had to be started every half hour or the oil would freeze solid. But Patton had prepared for more than just logistics. He knew winter combat was as much about morale as supplies. While other commanders stayed in heated headquarters, Patton made himself visible. He constantly traveled in an open jeep, his face often frozen, conducting daily inspections. The psychological effect was massive. Soldiers fighting in impossible conditions drew strength from knowing old blood and guts was sharing their suffering. His words spread through the ranks. "We're the finest soldiers in the world. This is our finest hour." It wasn't empty talk. Patton genuinely believed his soldiers could do the impossible, and his belief became theirs. The German mistake. The German response showed just how brilliant Patton's strategy was. German commanders had expected a quick reaction. They knew Patton's reputation, but even they were stunned by the speed and precision of the Third Army's move. The Germans hadn't believed any Allied force could pull off such a complex maneuver in winter. Their own experience in Russia had taught them how winter could completely stall even the best military machine. They assumed American forces, with their reputation for relying on comfort and logistics, would be even more affected. This miscalculation revealed a fundamental German mistake. They continued underestimating American military effectiveness, viewing U.S. forces as rich in equipment but poor in fighting spirit and tactical skill. But by now, the German army wasn't what it had been when it conquered Europe. The divisions attacking in the Ardennes were a mix of elite units and hastily assembled forces filled with teenagers and old men. Many hadn't eaten in days. Their vehicles ran on synthetic fuel that performed poorly in the cold. Their supply lines were already stretched to breaking. The breakthrough. The assault came during a massive snowstorm. It shocked German forces who'd assumed winter would prevent any major counteroffensive. Along a 20-mile front, American tanks and infantry smashed into the German flank, pushing 7 miles on the first day. The combat was savage. American forces, driven by Patton's constant demands for aggressive action, refused to give ground. The 4th Armored Division faced some of Germany's finest remaining units. Tigers and Panthers, the most fearsome German tanks, fought Shermans across frozen fields that quickly became killing grounds. Patton had even asked his chaplain to write a prayer for clear weather that would allow air support. The prayer went out to the entire Third Army, asking for divine help. Then, the clouds lifted. Allied fighter bombers descended on German positions like a storm of fire. The breakthrough came the day after Christmas. Elements of the 4th Armored Division broke through and linked up with the surrounded paratroopers in Bastogne. The corridor they opened was only 500 yards wide, but it shattered the German encirclement. But Patton wasn't satisfied. While other commanders might have been happy just relieving Bastogne, he saw the bigger picture. The German offensive had overextended their forces, creating opportunities for devastating counterattacks. "Brad," he told General Bradley, "this time the crowd stuck his head in the meat grinder and I've got hold of the handle." The reckoning. The destruction of German forces in the Ardennes took 6 weeks of brutal winter combat. Soldiers from both sides fought in conditions that defy description. Foxholes carved from frozen earth, weapons that froze solid, men sharing body heat to avoid freezing to death. The pristine white snow gradually turned red with the blood of thousands. When American forces from north and south finally met, the Bulge was eliminated. The German offensive, which Hitler hoped would break Allied unity and force negotiations, had become a catastrophe for the German army. German casualties topped 100,000 men, with over 700 tanks and 1,600 aircraft destroyed. Critically, Germany had burned through its last strategic reserves in a gamble that completely failed. The legacy. Patton's role in this victory can't be overstated. His ability to move 6 full divisions in 72 hours while keeping them combat ready was one of the most extraordinary achievements in military history. The Battle of the Bulge proved that George Patton was more than just an aggressive tank commander. He was a strategic genius who understood that bold action could transform dire situations into decisive victories. The Germans, who'd mocked American military ability, weren't laughing anymore. They'd learned at terrible cost that American soldiers, led by commanders like Patton, could fight and win under the most extreme conditions imaginable. Winston Churchill called it, undoubtedly the greatest American battle of the war. For Patton, it was vindication, proof that his entire life spent preparing for war had meaning. The moment when one man's ability to see opportunity in disaster changed everything. The snow had turned crimson, but it was German blood staining the winter fields of the Ardennes, not American. The truth about war. The Battle of the Bulge revealed a fundamental truth that Patton understood better than any commander of his generation. Superior leadership, aggressive action, and absolute confidence in your soldiers can overcome any tactical disadvantage. The Germans had launched their offensive believing winter weather and American inexperience would guarantee success. Instead, they discovered that Patton's Third Army could fight anywhere, anytime, against any enemy. The Ardennes didn't become Hitler's triumph. It became his final defeat and the moment when American forces proved themselves in the crucible of winter warfare. One general made a promise that seemed impossible. Then he kept it, and in doing so, he changed the course of the war.